1 year over Halloween, I was visiting my cousins. We were all the same age. Like any normal teenagers, we were bored, and with nothing to do, we decided to go trick-or-treating. My cousins lived in this really old area. All of the houses were well over 100 years old. The entire place looked like something out of a horror movie. We knocked on a few doors, and everything was going good until my cousin dared me to knock on the door of the house at the very end of the street. Thinking nothing of it, I walked up to the house while they stayed behind me. As I knocked on the door, it slowly opened and creaked. It was really dark inside, with just a little light coming from one of the rooms further back in the house. I remember thinking that all the people in the house must have gone out for Halloween, but this place had a really creepy vibe. I called out, but there was just silence. I started to feel really creeped out. I was just about to leave when I heard a woman's voice say, "Come on in." There was no way I was going in there, so I just waited, and then I heard her say again, "Come on in, we're here." I was really scared now. I was just standing there frozen, because there was something about that voice. It was so dark in there I couldn't even see. Then suddenly, I heard a loud bang, and what sounded like heavy footsteps rushing towards me from the back of the house. That was when I ran. My cousins were all laughing at me, but when I told them about the creepy voice telling me to go inside, they stopped laughing. It turned out that house had been abandoned for years and was known to be haunted in the community. When I was 8, my family moved into an old colony that was built in 1810. My father still lives there now. Until I was 17, every night before I fell asleep, I would feel pressure next to me, as if someone sat down on the bed next to me. This would always be accompanied by a feeling of increased pressure in the air. Although I knew this probably didn't happen to everyone else, I didn't think much about it. This was until I got a cat. He was a present for my 12th birthday. Each night he would sleep in the bed with me. At some point, always in the middle of the night, he would go from a dead sleep, sprint out of the bed, and glare at something in the doorway before sprinting out of there. A few moments after that, the pressure would return again. I didn't really question it. I thought maybe the cat was crazy or something. However, I did end up referring to this pressure as Charlotte. I don't know why. One day in the summer when I was 13, an old man and his middle-aged daughter pulled up to our house. They explained that the father lived in the house with his aunt while he was a boy, and that he was raised there for a few years. They had been visiting family in the neighborhood, and they wondered if they could take a tour for old time's sake. My mom said sure. She, my sister, and I led them around the house, and they recalled different memories. Afterwards, my mom asked them if they remembered strange occurrences or stories about the house, like ghosts or haunted. The man asked and chuckled. His daughter became very quiet and said firmly, "It's not funny." The man explained that everyone who slept in the bedroom that I slept in felt always unsettled. His daughter interrupted to say that she always felt as if someone sat on the edge of the bed and tried to go to sleep with her. Her father said they used to say it was a joke, and it was his aunt just looking out for them, his Aunt Charlotte. This confirmed what I never admitted to myself. I had had a ghost that basically tucked me in at night for the previous 5 years. Still going to bed was never scary or freaky. I just tried to ignore the feeling when it came. This was until one night when I was 16. My parents had been going through a weird patch in their marriage, and I was feeling really depressed. I ended up going to bed, and after about 20 minutes, the cat did the normal bolting from the bed and ran down the hallway. I felt the familiar pressure on the side of the bed, but then a hand brushed through my hair. I immediately ran straight downstairs to the living room where my mom was. She woke up, saw my face, and asked me what was wrong. I told her I had a nightmare and left it at that. I spent the next week sleeping in the guest room. I finally got the nerve to go back to my old room, and I was nearly asleep when I realized I didn't have the pressure next to me. I rolled on my back and saw the figure of a woman in her 60s. She was wearing a house dress, her hair pulled back in a bun, with her arms folded. She was looking right at me, very concerned. When I found my voice, she disappeared out of the air. However, a few years later, my parents divorced, and my dad moved in with his girlfriend and her 4-year-old son. I wasn't really surprised, but she ended up telling me that her little boy said a lady named Charlotte told him stories at night. This happened about 4 years ago. I live in a resort community and started working for a local real estate agent, taking photos of homes for sale. I usually photograph 3 to 4 homes a week. I'd seen some unusual things, like the occasional hidden room or unique art collection left behind. I'd never encountered anything scary, though, until this happened. It was a summer day, warm and bright. I knew the neighborhood I was heading to and had no concerns about safety. The area was very suburban, with a large park and school nearby. I packed up my camera and drove 20 minutes to the home. Upon arrival, I began my session by taking pictures of the exterior. Nothing was out of the ordinary, and after struggling to navigate the sharp slope the home was on, I managed to snap its sides and rear deck. It was time now for the interior shots, and I proceeded to the front door and entered the code and tried to unlock the front door. As I fumbled with it, I felt overwhelmingly uncomfortable. Something washed over me in that moment, and I knew I shouldn't have been there. I finally opened the door and found a house completely destroyed. The living room was a sea of debris, an EMT board laid in the middle with a charred doll beside it. Holes littered through the walls. Light bulbs were smashed everywhere. It was a scene straight out of a horror movie. I observed all of this without taking a single step further. I immediately closed the door, walked to my car as fast as I could, and called the agent. I told the agent she would need to find someone else to take pictures of this house. She asked me why, and as I tried to explain it to her, I realized I sounded a little crazy. I didn't know how to professionally describe to someone the feeling of being scared for no apparent reason other than the house being filthy. She told me she'd seen homes that were less than welcoming, but we both had a job to do, and she couldn't complete hers without me doing mine. I left the property, but decided I didn't want to lose my job over this. I called my father, who lived locally, and asked if he'd accompany me to the house. In all my days, I had never heard my dad discuss anything remotely spooky. He's a very no-nonsense kind of man, and simply won't tolerate talk of ghosts or witches. I thought he'd be perfect for this assignment. He'd keep my head in the game for sure, and I arranged to pick him up at his house in 30 minutes. My heart sank a little as I pulled up to my parents' house, and my dad's truck was gone. My mom came running out, purse in hand, to tell me that my father had to leave for work reasons, but she'd go with me instead. She brought along a flashlight and assured me that I'd just be fine. As we drove to the house, I described to her what had happened. Her cheerfulness came down a few notches, and I could tell she was slightly unnerved. We parked in front of the house, and I knew she didn't want to go inside. I didn't want her to go inside either. She ended up coming up with a solution. She'd call my cell phone and talk to me as I walked through the house. She'd stand right outside the front door. I answered her call, turned on my flashlight, and headed in. Again, immediately upon entering, I was scared. Just for clarification, I'm not scared easily, and I'm not one to see or feel things of that nature ever, so the fact that I was actually feeling something terrified me. By this time it was later in the day, and the house was positioned in such a way that it was completely shaded from the sun. The electricity was off and it was dark, very dark. My mother was on the phone telling me to breathe. I had a hard time speaking as all I took in is what I saw. The toilets were completely black on the inside. The kitchen had a blackish reddish smears all over the counters. I just kept clicking, trying to focus on anything other than the disturbing things inside this house. I went as quickly as I could through the main level. I then came to a set of stairs leading down. I told my mom through the cell phone that I was heading down. She continued to reassure me and told me to hurry up and get it over with. I began walking extremely cautiously down the steps one at a time. The steps led to a landing and then turned the corner. All I could see was a white wall at the bottom, and I had this immense feeling that I was going to see something horrific once I turned that corner. I was 2 or 3 steps away from the landing when I heard it, a scream coming from my phone. Not a mild scream, but a blood-curdling scream, like someone was being murdered on the other end of my line. My mom. I've never ran, nor have I ever since as fast as I did up those steps. I completely expected to find my mom laying lifeless just outside the house. I got to the top of the steps and there she was, standing there looking completely terrified and perplexed. I grabbed her hand and we ran to the car. We drove for nearly 5 minutes before one of us said anything. She then turned to me and said, "Tell me why you were screaming." I told her that I thought it was her. Neither one of us were screaming, but both of us, for a certainty, heard a woman screaming for her life on that phone. We stopped at a grocery store parking lot and just sat there, trying to catch our breath. When I got home, I uploaded the pictures without actually looking at them and sent them to the real estate agent. I told her she'd have to do the editing on her own, as I would not have them on my computer. I then deleted the email and every single image. Because of that, I don't know the address of that house, nor have I ever driven by it since. In hindsight, I would have liked to research the history of the property. Alas, I'll never know what happened there.